We're in Job chapter 8. We're introduced to a new guy, Bildad, tonight. You know, we had Eliphaz, whatever his name was. But again, you got to remember this book predates any other book that we know of in the Bible. This is probably the first written book of the Bible. It's Job is somewhere between the flood and Abraham. It seems like he's fairly close to the flood, soon after the flood, I guess I should say. But we don't know. So, he's going to live another 140 years after this experience. So we know, he's probably already 70, 80 years old. And so, he lives 200 and something years. And, Abraham, 180, something like that. So, yeah, he was in that when they were coming down from living 600 years to living just like we do, 120 years, 110 years, 80 years, whatever it is we live. Aren't you glad you're 70 years old? You're only halfway there. No, huh? I know. I like being on the other side of that too. I got less long to live in this planet with this spacesuit on, less long than the other thing. So again, he doesn't have a Bible to read. He doesn't have an Old Testament. Doesn't have a New Testament. There's no Israel. No mention of the patriarchs, no mention of any of that stuff. And so really interesting timing for him. The things he doesn't know about, he doesn't know that God and Satan are having a little spiritual contest. Satan says, hey, do this, and Job will curse you to his face. And God goes, really? Try it. And he gives him access to Job's stuff, and he takes all of Job's stuff, all of his possessions, all of his cattle, all of his lands, all of his houses, everything, and including his 10 kids, wipes them out in one day. Job falls to his knees and worships. Next time Satan and God get together, God goes, hey, you ever considered my buddy Job? Even though you caused me to totally destroy his whole life, look, he hasn't turned on me. And Satan goes, flesh for flesh. A man will give anything to keep his own life. So let me have his life. And God says, I'll allow you to take him, but you got to leave his life. So you can play with his health. You can do whatever you. And the next scene, Satan shows up, and he's got, he curses Job with painful boils, it says, from the top of his head to the sole of his feet. How far could he go? That far. And that's how far he went immediately, So his 3 friends show up. They sit with him for 7 days, don't say a word. They just sit with him. They're shocked at what's going on in Job's life. And after 7 days, Job opens his mouth, speaks, man, I wished I'd have never been born. I wished I'd just die. I wish this was over. Who wouldn't want to, think that way? And then last week, Eliphaz, he challenged Job. There must be a reason God's doing this to you. Nobody knows about this spiritual thing going on up in heaven. There must be a reason. Therefore, Job, you must have some secret sin. And how wrong it is to look at somebody's life and say, the reason you're in this mess is because of some secret sin. You can never make that decision because you have no idea what's happening spiritually behind the scenes. Now, if you see someone doing stupid things and heading in a wrong direction, it's okay to say, hey, I kind of see this in your life and you're heading in a bad direction. Perhaps you should come back. It's cool beforehand, but never show up in the midst of a storm and say, it's because of you. You're the idiot. There's some thing going on there. So last week, Job, you must be wrong. You must be in error. There is some secret sin in your life. And Job answers those things. And now his buddy Bildad is going to jump in. It says, and Bildad the Shuhite, this is the shortest guy in the Bible. He's just a Shuhite. He is, the second shortest guy, Job 8. The second shortest guy is Nehemiah. We could just go on and on. I love this kind of stuff, Anyway, Bildad the Shuhite, answers and says, how long will you speak these things and the words of your mouth be like strong wind? I like this. This is not how you start out counseling somebody. You usually bring up something good, something positive. You try to ease into the hard thing. He says, man, it's like you're full of hot air. You're just full of hot air. There's just stuff coming out of you. Does God subvert judgment? Or does the Almighty pervert justice? Of course he doesn't, right? The answer is of course not. God is righteous. God is holy. He's the reason we have the standards is because the standard is him. He doesn't divert from who he is, you know. If your sons have sinned against him, he has cast them away for their transgression. Maybe it was your kids' fault that they died. Maybe they were in some sin. Maybe they were doing something stupid. And in a way, Bildad is correcting something Eliphaz said a couple of chapters ago, because Eliphaz says, Job, you did something wrong, therefore God killed your kids. And we know that's stupid. That's wrong. Look up Ezekiel chapter 18. You will not be punished for your sins of your parents or for the sins of your kids. No, God deals with you on the basis of you, not with generational sins or, all of this weird stuff that floats through the church sometimes. We know that God is just. He's not unjust. Therefore, it must have been some transgression of theirs that they did. The problem with this is he doesn't know all the facts. He doesn't know there's a spiritual battle going on. He doesn't know there's this contest between God and Satan. So he's just looking at the surface factors and trying to make sense of it. The trouble really is he can't handle a God that's bigger than his theology. I can think of a God like this, but when God steps out of my box, I'm uncomfortable with that, and I have to cut off some areas of God so he fits back in my box, If you've got God in a box, you've got the wrong God. He doesn't fit in a box, Remember Solomon? He built that temple? Huge, massive, glorious thing, and he gets done and he goes, yeah, what good is this? Because we know God can't dwell in this temple. The heaven of heavens can't contain him. What are we thinking, he's going to be in here? And just about the time you get God all figured out, you got him in your box and you're just starting to put him back in your pocket, he will do something that will blow your mind and you'll go, wait a minute, how's that work? He's doing that to these guys. So many people today come towards God, but with a predisposition of what God needs to be like. Well, he needs to do this and he needs to do that. And if he doesn't do that, then he's not my God. Good news for you. He's not your God, That's why it says none seek after God in the New Testament. None. Because they're seeking after a God they want that fits their mold, and our God doesn't fit their mold. Our God fits his mold, and you got to change to him, not him change to you, He can't handle something he can't categorize about God. And we're going to find that in his speech. He says in verse 5, if you would just earnestly seek God and make your supplication to the Almighty, if you were pure and upright, surely now he would awake for you and prosper your rightful dwelling place. Job, if you would just come to God with a right heart. What's he saying? You're wrong again. Something's off. Something's wrong with the way you're approaching God, You need to get yourself right. Now, there is truth in this statement as far as this statement goes. Anybody in this world, if they will approach God with a right heart, they will find God. He will be found of them. We have that promise. It just doesn't apply to Job in this situation, because Job isn't being punished because he's bad. He's the only upright, blameless man on planet Earth at this time. The Bible tells us that. God tells us that in this book. Imagine that. And yet his friends are going, but it's got to be you, buddy. It's got to be you. You ever have a friend do that? Okay, fine, Though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. And it's interesting, that happens at the end of this book, not for this reason, because Job has always sought God with his heart. But, he does increase abundantly. He gets twice as much as he ever had, except he doesn't get 20 kids, he only gets 10, because I'm thinking 20 kids wouldn't be a blessing. It's just the way I think. Anyway. For inquire, please, of the former age, and consider these things discovered by their fathers. For we were born like yesterday, and know nothing, because our days on earth are like a shadow. And he begins to bring up this thing, hey, consider these guys from the former age. And he will make some statements that make you think he's talking about Noah. He's even talking about pre-diluvian, pre-flood people. Think about those guys. They lived 600, 800, 900 years. And these guys are going to live like 200. And he says, our life is like a vapor. Our life is just flash in a pan. Those guys really lived some time back then. They really had some wisdom. So we should be able to look back and get wisdom from them. And that makes you think about, how did they learn about the older generations? Did Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, did they bring books with them? Did they bring writings? Did they tell stories? What came with them about what happened before that? Because we know there were writings because we have the creation story in the Bible. Now, Moses wrote that in there, but it may not have all been, his connection with God. There may have been some actual writings that came down from that stuff. For we were born yesterday. These guys who are talking to him are older than him. But compared to guys who live 600, 800 years, their lives are not long here. But Bildad thinks you can learn everything from the older generations. Well, you can't learn everything from the older generation. Yes, there's wisdom in older generations, but not everything, Will they not teach you and tell you and utter words from their heart? And now he's going to switch from nature, or he's going to switch from people, the older generations, to look at nature. Can the papyrus grow up without a marsh? Can the reeds flourish without water? While it is yet green and not cut down, it withers before any other plant. You ever been to one of those places where there's like a marsh? And all the cattails grow up, you got all these cattails and they just spring up. But as soon as the water starts to recede, those things are the first things to dry up. And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about there are some plants that absolutely need water, And even when they're surrounded with water still, they begin to dry up. And he says, Job, that's kind of like you. So are the paths of all who forget God, and the hope of the hypocrite shall perish. Hey, Job, you're just like those reeds, man. You're surrounded by God's goodness. You're surrounded by his water. You're surrounded by all this stuff, but you're drying up. There's something wrong. Something's got infected you, And the hope of the hypocrite. Job, you're a liar. You're putting on a mask. You're telling stories. Whose confidence shall be cut off and whose trust is like a spider's web. You ever try to lean on a spider's web? Ever try to, they're not very tough. Though they look pretty, they put on a good show. He leans on his house, but it does not stand. He holds it fast, but it does not endure. He grows green in the sun, and his branches spread out like a garden. His roots wrap around the rock heap and look for a place in the stones. He's saying, Job, the root of your problem is your roots are wrapped around a stone and they're not down deep in God's goodness in the ground. It's like, that plant that takes root in your rock wall, there's no depth to it. Verse 18, If he is destroyed from his place, then it will deny him, saying, I have not seen him. Behold, this is the joy of his way, and out of the earth others will grow. It's like, I have my own picture of this. You pull up a weed, and next week you come back and you never knew it was there. There's the grass is, the ground has just gone back to the way it was. You can't even tell. For me, it's like pulling your hand out of a bucket of water. Go out and fill up a 5-gallon bucket of water. Put your hand in there, and then pull your hand out. Wait a minute. Does it miss your hand now? Didn't even know your hand was in there. You can't even tell. And that's what he's saying, The place where you were planted won't even remember you when you're gone. Behold, God will cast away the blameless. Behold, God will not cast away the blameless, nor will he uphold the evildoer. He will yet fill your mouth with laughing and your lips with rejoicing. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the dwelling place of the wicked will come to nothing. He basically says, Job, if you just get your heart right, if you just approach God right, he will acknowledge you again. God's blessing will return to you again. The trouble is, God's blessing never left Job. Circumstances came, but God still got his hand on him. You can't take his life. God still set a limit. No, I pulled back the hedge, but you can't get total access to him. You can't take him anywhere I'm not allowing him to go. And that's good for us believers to understand, is we have a hedge about us, and Satan can only go where God allows him to go. Circumstances can only go as far as God allows that circumstance to go, and it can't go any farther. And remember in the New Testament, I have you in my hand, and nothing can get you out of my hand. And then my Father has you in his hand, and nothing can get you out of the Father's hand. Where are you? You're right here. Oh, does he allow experiences in your life? Yes, he does. To train you, to teach you, to conform you into the image of Christ. We don't like those, but it does happen. Then Job answered and said, truly I know it is so. I kind of like the way he says, he's literally saying, like, could you tell me something I don't know? Could you bring up anything new, anything relevant to my situation? It'd be good, Truly I know it is so. But how can a man be righteous before God? Now, Job says, I understand there's this process of sowing and reaping. If I sow evil, I'm going to reap evil. If I sow righteousness, I'm going to reap righteousness. I understand this process. But he says, but how can me, being a mere human, ever be righteous before God? Oh, see, Job knows something. Job knows, I'm a sinner. I have issues. There's some problems in Job. Even though he brings offerings, he brings sacrifices, he brings all of this stuff. So he's blameless. He's not sinless. He's blameless, It's like us. We are justified, just as if we'd never sinned, but we were sinners, and we are sinners, but we're justified. How's that work out? Well, God says this one. I lived this one, right? God says I'm justified in spite of this, right? Because the blood covered this. He says in verse 3, if one wished to contend with him, that word contend is interesting because he's going to start using courtroom language. If I wanted to take God to court, if I wanted to bring litigation against God, God, this is unfair. God, this isn't right. You said this, and now it's going that way. How could I do that? If someone wanted to do that, he could not answer him one time out of 1,000. Can you imagine asking God questions and then being on the witness stand while he asked you a few? What's interesting is at the end of this book, God's going to ask Job 77 questions. Boom, 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 boom. And Job can't answer one of them. And it's going to display the sovereignty and the glory of God, and Job's just going to sit down and shut up and say, never mind. Never mind. But in verse 15, he's going to say, I would beg mercy of my judge. That's the one who's accusing me. How would I do that? Or in verse 19, he's going to say, it's like being subpoenaed to a courtroom. It's when will I get my day in court? So all the way through this chapter, he's going to use courtroom language and say, how would we ever go before our judge, our God, in court and ever come out the victor? How is that ever possible? Job knows there's some legal, moral law standard. How many times have we gone through something that's so painful or so hard or so disrupts our life, and we sit there and go, but God, this just isn't fair. This doesn't seem right. You said, your word says, you're going to bless me and you're going to keep me and you've got me. And then this happens. And how does that work together? And you go through those things, And when it doesn't fit your reason, your logic, how can a God of love do this? When it doesn't fit that, you know where you run to? You run to the courtroom of reason and fairness. It's not fair. Right? That ain't fair, God. You're a God of love and you stand by and let this happen. Let me get bankrupt. Let me go homeless. Let me do this. Let me get cancer. You're a God of love and that happen. How does that happen? And it's an internal struggle. That struggle takes place right here, by the way, most of it, right? And most of the time, we won't talk to other believers when we're going through those situations because, for two reasons. I don't want to stumble somebody else. Oh man, if they think I'm struggling with my faith, then that would be bad, so I'm not even going to bring that up when you're around. Or you don't want to hear, well, Pastor Mark, all things work together for the good of those who love Jesus, You ever had somebody do that when you're struggling? That's painful. It's like, I don't want to hear that. I want real comfort, In Psalm 73, a psalm of Asaph. Asaph is this guy, and he's watching the world, and he starts out his psalm, and he says, truly God is good. That's how he starts out the psalm. But that's the trouble with his psalm. Because you go through the psalm and he says, man, I see the wicked prospering. And I see the righteous suffering. And I see all of this stuff going on. And it's not making any sense to me. If God is good, where is he? What's going on? How come all of this stuff is happening? He's surrounded. It doesn't make any sense in my brain anymore. You ever been there? We live there, by the way. Right? We have this little tiny church. All 10 of us show up, It's great. We love the Lord and we're here to serve him and, he's going to bless us and all of that stuff. But you look around and the system we're surrounded with is wealthy. It has the best of everything, right? It seems not to have any struggles at all. And here we are and every one of us are struggling with something. And fighting and battling, and we can't afford to put a roof on the building, and we can't afford to do this, and you can't do, and it doesn't make any sense. You ever had one of those conversations with the Lord? Because I have them on occasion, And what's so stupid is those aren't life and death situations, But they still entangle us. They get us all. And sometimes we see or we experience injustice, seemingly, from God. How can that be just? How can that happen? We've got to be careful there. Because Job needs to be careful here because he's walking in a place that's unknown to him. And when you find yourself in a place where you don't know what to do and you don't know what God's going to do, you need to fall back on what you do know about God. He loves me. He has me. He says he's got me. He says he's going to work all these things out. He says all of that stuff. I'm going to run there and hang out there and let the circumstances just do whatever they're going to do. Because Asaph says, man, I had almost stumbled. My feet were in a slippery spot, and I almost stumbled over this until I went into the sanctuary of God. He goes to church, and he gets a little perspective, eternal perspective. Then I understood their end. This is as close to heaven as they are ever going to get. This is as close for you and me, believers, to hell as we will ever get. Right? Doesn't that change your perspective? It's like, oh man, it's rough, but I'm not going to hell for eternity. Jesus, for some reason, saved my worthless hide. I'm kind of excited about that. And it changes your perspective almost immediately, and it changed Asaph. Sometimes you can only deal with circumstances eternally, not, horizontally, not physically. Job's going through this chapter and he's saying, God, something's really wrong here. Something's really really tweaked. Well, there is, right? Because God's had this little challenge from Satan and he says, well, go for it. My buddy Job's up to it. And Job has no idea that he's up to it. But he's just in there. Something's very wrong here. And you guys aren't helping me at all. You're supposed to be my comforters, my friends. And you guys, man, I wish you'd just shut up and sit down again, It was good then. So if I was going to take God to court, I know I couldn't answer him. Job has a pretty good sense of reality here. He has a pretty good sense that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and he's not, And then verse 4, he says, God is wise in heart and mighty in strength, who has hardened himself against him and prospered. That's a great question. Who has? Who has ever hardened themselves? Ooh, I'm against God and I'm going to prove whatever, Who's ever done that and prospered? Nobody. Nobody, especially eternally, right? Because as soon as Judgment Day shows up, bingo, it's all over, right? God cannot allow someone hardened to flourish. He can't allow it, and he won't allow it. He can't allow someone in rebellion to prosper. Can't do it. His love and his grace can't allow that to happen because his love and his grace want them to be broken at the foot of the cross, seeing what Jesus has done for them and being open to what that work accomplished for them. So verse 5, he removes the mountains. They do not know. And when he overturns them in his anger, he shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble. Is he talking about the flood? I always wonder about that. He turns mountains upside down. We went to Yellowstone one time. We were at the east gate. Can't remember which one it is. It's the one that goes into the Dakotas or whatever up there. And we were up there and we were doing the little tour thing, and the guy, the ranger actually said that mountain had rolled over. And that's why the seashells were on the top of it. And I'm just like, you don't apparently believe in the flood that covered the whole earth and put the seashells on top of the mountains like this, right? But, he literally believed that mountain rolled over. I'm like, I would have liked to have been there to see that. It's like those guys that think all the continents used to be all connected and then they split apart. You realize that what's under the oceans is land, right? Rock. How does that move? Thousands of miles? How? How does a continent just drift when rock is in its way? Dirt is over here, and dirt is over here, and dirt is here. How does it just move? It doesn't. Oh, we've got these fault lines, and they've been known to move 4 or 5 inches at a big whack. Well, that's a lot of moving there, you know. No wonder it took billions of years. Anyway, verse 6. He shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble. He commands the sun, and it does not rise. He seals off the stars. He alone spreads out the heavens and treads on the waters of the sea. I like that. He alone spreads out the heavens. No Big Bang. Oh, the Big Bang happened and it threw everything out there. You realize the most modern scientists in the world now believe that everything was out there, and now it's starting to recede. Now it's actually kind of pulling back. It's interesting. 11 times in the Bible it says God stretched out the heavens. One of these days he's going to roll them up like an old, blind on a window. Verse 9, he made the Bear and the Orion and the Pleiades and the chambers of the south. Isn't it funny? This is maybe the first book written in the Bible, and they call these star systems the same systems we call them today. By name. In Isaiah 40, verse 26, it says, lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these things, who brings out the host by number and calls them all by name. By the greatness of his might and by the strength of his power, not one of them is missing. The chambers of the south seem to be an allusion to the constellations down there. He does great things past finding out. Yes, wonders without number. Job knows God's up to something, but he knows it's past his finding out. That's very wise, by the way. You're going through something and you go, God, I know you're up to something, but I do not understand it. In the New Testament, it says, God will give you the peace that surpasses understanding. If you're going through a storm, you can pray for that, and he will give you peace through that storm. Oh, it doesn't stop the storm. The storm's still going on, but you're at peace in your heart. I have experienced that. I love that. I still wondered about the understanding thing. I still want to know why this is happening, why that's going on. But if he ever gives you the peace that surpasses understanding, then stop looking for understanding. I'd rather have the peace than the understanding. If you want the understanding, enjoy that. I'd rather have the peace, He does great things beyond finding out. We have, scientists say, about 10 billion brain cells, and each one of those is connected to 10,000 connections, neural connections. Every cell connected to 10,000 other connections. You have ears. And they hear all kinds of stuff, don't they? They hear whispers, they hear a guy cough over there, they hear, you hear all of these things, and you choose to bring it in or reject it. I'm not hearing that, or I don't care about that, or whatever. You have eyes, and you see, you just think about your eyes. Millions of cones and rods. And they all have all of these connections all the way through your brain, clear down to your brainstem. And God is beyond all of that, right? I mean, man's doing all of this studying, and we figured all these things out. We got all this stuff. But God is way out there somewhere. We can't even grasp a hold of him, He created all of this, and we still don't stop and listen to him. We still don't stop and pay attention to him. Verse 11, if he goes by me, I do not see him. If he moves past, I do not perceive him. I like this. Job says, God can stroll right past me, and I'm totally unaware of it. God can sneak up on you. Has he ever snuck up on you? And you didn't know he was sneaking up on you, you know? If he takes away, who can hinder him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? You know, he comes and he takes away from you. Hey, don't take that away. Who do you think you are? What do you think you're up to? You have no right. How far do you get with that line of things with God? This is my creation. I own everything. Not just the cattle on 1,000 hills. You read the next verse, it says he owns everything. You know? Your kid was his kid before it was your kid. You know? He's just on loan to you. All of those things. God will not withdraw his anger. The allies of the proud lie prostrate beneath him. It's an interesting thing in the Greek. It's the helpers of Rahab. The allies of the proud, the helpers of Rahab. And it seems to be an allusion to the dragon of old, the serpent of chaos. It's an allusion to Satan. And if Satan can't stand up to God, what chance do we have to stand up to God? That's what Job's saying. Verse 14, how then can I answer him and choose my words to reason with him? For though I were righteous, I could not answer him. I would beg mercy of my judge. I like that. God is so huge, so powerful, so awesome. You know, you got to get that into your brain. He's saying God is wow. And me, I'm dirtball, man, you know. I'm just a pile of dirt. Who am I? How could I ever bring a question or a reason or logic? How could I ever do that stuff? And even if he did, if I called and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. How many times has that ever happened? You're praying about something, and God lays something on your heart, and you go, ooh, is that you, God? Are you sure? You don't even believe him when he talks to you, you know? Job had the same problems. For he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. Notice his perspective. He is crushing me right now, and he is multiplying my wounds. You know, things are getting worse. They are not getting better. It's been months and months, and they are not getting better. And he's doing it, now notice this, without cause. That's a lie. That's an untruth. But Job doesn't really know that, right? As far as Job can see, what's happening to him is totally wrong. But he doesn't know about the contest. He doesn't know what's going on behind heaven's doors, you know? Job doesn't know there's a battle in heaven. He doesn't know the cause. But here he steps across the line and he begins to point his finger at God and saying, you're wrong. He begins to, blame God. But think about that. He's lasted much longer than I have. You ever lost all 10 kids in one day? Me either. You ever lost everything you've ever owned? Gone. And then months and months with painful boils from the top of your head to the bottom of your foot. You're laying out there scraping the ooze and the goose and the guck off of you. It's painful to breathe. It's painful to swallow. You don't want to eat because it doesn't sit well in your belly. Going through all of this stuff, he's lasted a long time. I stub my toe and I go, God, what are you doing? I'm your servant. You know? Verse 18, he will not allow me to catch my breath. It hurts me to breathe, but fills me with bitterness. If it is a matter of strength, indeed, he is strong, And of justice, who will appoint my day in court? When do I get my subpoena? When do I show up in court so me and God can have this thing out? Though I were righteous, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I were blameless, it would prove me perverse. I am blameless, yet I do not know myself. I despise my life. It is all one thing. Therefore I say, he destroys the blameless and the wicked. I can't see any difference any longer, Lord. I see you destroying me, and I see you destroying the wicked guy over in the corner. And wicked and the blameless seems like he's destroying willy-nilly. He's doing whatever he wants. But we know that's not true. Actually, we know the opposite to be true. We read in the Bible, it says he causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust alike. But Job is saying God destroys the just and the unjust alike. God doesn't care. He's wrong. God does care. Verse 23, if the scourge slays suddenly, he laughs at the plight of the innocent. No, he doesn't. But I can understand his heart. I can understand where he is. Because I've been in less places than where Job is, and those thoughts have run through my heart, my mind. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, who else could it be? This is wrong. This is wicked. This is evil. And if God isn't making this happen, who else could it be? Oh, there is another choice. Now my days are swifter than a runner. They flee away, they see no good. They pass like swift ships, like an eagle swooping on its prey, 140 miles an hour through the air. My days are just flying by, and what good are they doing? I'm just sitting here scraping my wounds, I'm just sitting here worthless. I feel like time is just passing me by and nothing good is happening. If I say, well, I'll forget my complaint, I'll put off my sad face and wear a smile. Anybody ever tell you that? Well, just cheer up. Good luck with that. It's a choice, And it is. Okay, I'll buy that. But when you're going through a storm, that's like, well, all things work together for the good. That's one of those cliches that doesn't sit really good in the midst of a storm, I am afraid of all my sufferings. I know that you will not hold me innocent. If I am condemned, why then do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with snow water and cleanse my hands with soap, yet you will plunge me into the pit, and my own clothes will abhor me. He begins to talk to his friends again, and he said, even if I was righteous, even if I washed my hands with soap and water and were just pure and spotless, you guys are just dumping me in the old pit every time you talk to me, and I come up dirty again. And I come up dirty in my heart because you guys are condemning me. You guys make me think I'm guilty of this. For he is not a man, talking about God again, as I am, that I may answer him, and that he should go to court, that we should go to court together. God knew that Almighty God was Almighty God. God is not a man. Did you read that? Now, I realize it's in Job, so you got to kind of wonder, is that biblical doctrine? That is biblical doctrine. We're surrounded by a community that thinks God was once a man and became God. He's just an exalted man God. There's no such thing. First of all, there's no exalted man except Christ. He's the only exalted man, and that's because he's God-man. He came down as God, and he left as God. And then a bright spot. Nor is there any mediator between us who may lay his hand on us both. Job's got this great opinion. God, high, holy, separate from sinners, he is amazing, and here's me, dirt man. And there's no mediator. There's nobody between that can lay his hand on Job and understand Job's life, and lay his hand on God and understand God's life, and bring them together to mediate. But the New Testament tells us this, 1 Timothy 2:5. For there is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself a ransom, only place in the Bible it uses that word, for all, literally in place of all, to be testified in due time. Paul is telling Timothy, we now have a mediator, someone who can lay his hand on God's shoulder and lay his hand on your shoulder and understand both and bring you together. That's Jesus' purpose, right? He's our lawyer. He's our advocate. He's our mediator. And his dad's the judge. You think he's going to pound down the gavel? Nope, son, he's guilty. Nope. If Jesus got his hand on your shoulder, you're in. Come on in. Sneak in, And then in Hebrews, I like it because it's in Hebrews, because Hebrews is talking to a religious people that are used to law and rule and regulation and, all of these things, and they've been that way for generations. Hebrews talks to them, and it says in Hebrews 2:14, inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had power over death, that is, the devil, and release those who through the fear of death all their lifetime were subject to his bondage. There are people who have fear death their entire life. You get that? I just scared to death of dying. My mom was one of those. I am not ready. I'm scared to death. Yeah, you should be, because you're not ready. You need Jesus before you go there. For indeed, he does not give aid to angels, but he does give aid to the seed of Abraham. Therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is also to aid those who are tempted. Oh, he was tempted. He knew temptation, right? He knew what that was like. And so he knows when you're tempted. He knows how to get you through that. He knows what it's like. And then again in Hebrews 4:15, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne room of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace in time of need. For every high priest taken from among men is appointed for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sin. He can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is also subject to the same weaknesses. Therefore, he is able to save to the uttermost those who come to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for him. We have this description of Jesus in the book of Hebrews. Who's our mediator? It's this guy that's walked a mile in our shoes. Think about it. He was born in a barn. He grew up in a one-parent, single-parent household. Poor. We know that because the offering for his offering was the doves, not a lamb. They were poor people. He was rejected. He was abused. He was, Judas betrayed him. You ever been betrayed? Oh, he knows what that's like. He was spit on. He was looked down on. He was made fun of. He was beaten. You look at all of those things. Oh, Jesus could never understand what I'm going through. I think he could understand it. I do, And here's Job. He's suffering. Think about how Job's suffering. He's suffering mentally. Lost my family. Lost my family. Yeah, I know something of what that's like. He's suffering physically. He's got something that's trying to kill him. He's suffering spiritually because him and God are kind of separate. He can't figure out what God's doing, and so it's not making any sense to him. What am I supposed to do? Oh, I'm supposed to take God to court? Yeah, that's going to solve my issues, He's the guy who does unsearchable things. He's the guy that created the entire universe. All of those star systems we sit out here and look at night, he put them all there, and he named every one of them. Not one of them's missing that he put up there, He's not a man. I'm so insignificant, and he's so amazing, And then you get to the New Testament. But we know of the incarnation, that God took on flesh, human flesh. God became a man, My favorite illustration of that is, chili con carne, right? Chili with meat. The incarnation, he took on flesh. God used the DNA in mankind and his creative genius, and he brought Jesus into this creation. And we know he was hungry. He was tired. He was acquainted with suffering. He was mocked, beaten. He went to the cross. We know all of those things. So when you're suffering, you can be assured he knows. He knows. He knows what it's like. He knows how to help you. He knows how to get you through it. He knows the pain. He knows the hardship. If you could just get alone with him, if you can just find yourself at the foot of the cross, then just look up. Because that guy hanging there knows what it's like. And he could walk you through that. He went through all of that so you could know him. Not so he could know you. He already knew you. He created you. We're going to get to that here in a couple of minutes. He created you. But so you could know him. I like that. There is no friend, there is no pastor, there is no spiritual leader, who can meet you in that place of despair. But Christ can. Verse 34, it says, "Let him take away his rod away from me, and do not let the dread of him terrify me. Then I would speak and not fear, but it is not so with me." His rod of judgment. Let him take that judgment away. Let him, because I have this dread, this fear of him. Because if I didn't have that fear of him, then I would speak. Here's the thing about you and me. I'm not terrified of God. See, Job lived in a day and age where he felt like he needed to be terrified of God. Now, I do have a reverential fear of God. He's all-powerful. He's holy. He's righteous. I don't want to tick him off, But I also know he's my dad. We were just talking about that before, Abba, And he tells me I can cry out to him and say, "Abba, Dad, I need you. I don't understand this. God, I need you." And he'll be there. Even in the midst of earth-shaking, desperate times like Job is going through, we can bring our heart to him, and he handles us with kid gloves because he loves us. You can take all of your cares and dump them right there in his office and walk away, because he delights in you. Job didn't know those things. Let's get through chapter 10. My soul loathes my life. I will give free course to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Show me why you contend with me. Does it seem good to you that you should oppress, that you should despise the work of your hands and smile on the counsel of the wicked? Man, Job's in a deep, dark place. Job doesn't understand this, that right now, at the right hand of the throne of God, human DNA sits there. Jesus, in human flesh, sits on the throne of God. He understands. He knows, That DNA, he brought eyes. He brought flesh, He ascended back into heaven in this thing. I mean, it was an upgrade, but it was this thing, right? Do you have eyes of flesh, or do you see as man sees? Are your days like the days of a mortal man? Are your years like the days of a mighty man, that you should seek for my iniquity and search out my sin? Although you know that I am not wicked, and there is no one who can deliver from your hand. My friends don't understand this, but you know that you and I have a righteous relationship, that I've been doing what you ask me to do. Your hands have made me and fashioned me, an intricate unity. I love this passage. Apparently Darwin hadn't written his book by now, because your hands have made me. I think that's very interesting, because a lot of people will say, well, God created Adam, and since Adam, God's kind of not involved. I got news for you. God created you in your mother's womb. It says so right here. Your hands. This is not some creative juices that flow through and do whatever the heck they're going to do. No, this is God-involved thing. And fashioned me an intricate unity. Yet you would destroy me? Remember, I pray, that you have made me like clay. Go out, take a big shovel full of dirt out here in the parking lot. Well, we don't have a parking lot. Out in the grass. And the same 17 elements that are out there in that dirt are sitting in your chair. I find that interesting, From dust we came, and from dust we're returning, And you will turn me into dust again. Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? Clothe me with skin and flesh and knit me together with bones and sinew. What a great picture this is. Notice how Job is describing the creative process. It's like I started out as milk, and then something happened and it started to curdle, and I came together as like a unit, like a cheese ball, And, I'm kind of cheesy that way, so that's good, because I'm sharp, I had a lot of cheese stuff, but I'm not going to go there. It was fun, though. It was fun thinking my way through that. And then you clothed me with skin and flesh. Notice this, if you will. The skin and the flesh is not you. He clothed you with skin and flesh. It's just like your shirt is not you, right? Oh, you're wearing the shirt. We're wearing this spacesuit, this body around, but this is not us. We're inside. We are souls and spirits that possess a body. My body's getting old. I don't know about yours. My body has a bad hip, bad brain. I got poor eyes. Have you noticed that all the writing on stuff's getting smaller? You pull out the thing. My wife bought me a book on photography one time. Maybe I bought it for myself, but I think she bought it for me. I wanted it. She bought it for me. I get it home. I open it up, and it's got like 6-point text. I'm like, who writes in 6-point text? Well, this guy did, you know? I'm like, why? I need it like 24 anymore, you know, to even be able to see. This thing's starting to wear out, but the guy inside's still like 19. Don't know about you? The guy inside is still, oh, I could do anything, whatever, you know. My brain's losing, you know, function. But I'm not, you know. Inside of me isn't. One day, this thing's going to lie down. It's going to give up. I'm not. And you know, I'm going to arise. I'm going to be free. And then one day we're going to be joined together. You know, here comes this body back, but it's going to have a great upgrade by that time. You know? Verse 12, you have granted me life and favor, and your care has preserved my spirit. And these things you have hidden in your heart. I know that this was with you. I know you know all about this, Lord. I know you understand this better than I understand this. I'm just telling you what I know. And if sin, then, you mark me, and will not acquit me of my iniquity. If I am wicked, woe to me. Even if I am righteous, I cannot lift up my head. I am full of disgrace. Can you see my misery? How broken is this guy? He feels like God's hunting him like a big game animal, you know, like a fierce lion. If my head is exalted, you hunt me like a fierce lion, and again you show yourself awesome against me, you know. It's like I've gone rogue. It's like I'm this dangerous animal, and you're on the hunt for me, and you pinned me down, and you've got me locked up, and you've caged me, and I can't get out, and, you know, you're doing all this stuff to me I don't understand. You renew your witness against me and increase your indignation towards me. Changes and war are ever with me. Why, then, have you brought me out of the womb? What was the purpose of my life if it was just to die like this? Oh, that I had perished and no eye would have seen me. I would have been as though I had not been. You ever think about that? I would have been as though I had not been. You know, one of the guys I listened to said, that's great bumper sticker material. People will run all over you because they'll be reading your bumper sticker and won't be able to figure it out until they run into you, you know. I would have been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not my days few? Cease, leave me alone that I may take a little comfort. Do you hear his heart? Just let go of me, God. It'd be so much easier if you just bring me home. It'd be so much easier if this was just over. This is one of those times, thank God for unanswered prayer. Because Job has no idea that he's going to recover and he's going to thrive for 140 years after this. He has no idea. But when you're going through the storm, you have no idea. All you have is hope, right? Before I go to the place from which I shall not return, to the land of darkness and the shadow of death, a land of dark, a land as dark as darkness itself, and the shadow of death without any order, where even the light is like darkness. Man, he is in a dark place. You just read through that last little passage, darkness, darkness, darkness. And there's 4 different words for darkness in there, you know, that he uses. My heart goes out to him. I've been in the midst of storms, and I don't like them, and I struggle against them, and I say stupid things in the middle of them, and I do all kinds of things, you know. But what Job really needs right now is a friend. Someone to just walk up to him and say, it's okay, buddy, I'm here with you. Let's cry together, you know. I don't understand it either, but let's pray, you know. Let's talk. You know. You want to say, Job, hang in there, buddy. Hang in there, babe. You know, Help is on the way. There's an end in sight. God has a future and a hope for you, but he doesn't have any of those scriptures. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it says, for we know, Job doesn't know, but Paul says, for we know that if our earthly house, this tent, this thing, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed with our habitation which is from heaven. Don't we? Oh, Lord, this thing's wearing out. Lord, this thing, I have to drag it out of bed in the morning, and then I have to drag it over here, and it doesn't like to do that anymore, and I got a bad, and it doesn't want to read, and my brain doesn't work, and you go through all of those things. So we are always confident knowing that while we are at home in the body, in this thing, we're absent from the Lord. There's a gap, right? For we walk by faith and not by sight. We are confident, yes, well pleased rather, to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Therefore we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well pleasing to him. Do you know somebody suffering? Somebody going through something? If you do, go be their friend. Don't open this. Just love on them. Just be there for them. These three guys, Bildad, Eliphaz, and Zophar, they came wanting to comfort Job, and they leave being cursed by God. God says, you better get yourself some offerings and take them to Job and have him sacrifice and pray for you, because I want to kill you. Otherwise, I'm going to kill you. Can you imagine how fast? Because he says, you've spoken things that are not right of me. Like my servant Job has. He still says Job spoke well of him, even through the storm, And if you're suffering, go to Jesus. Go to the cross. Look up. Because there's the answer. There's the help. There's everything you need right there. He's been through it, and he will help you through it, right?